Britain stood alone against Nazi Germany. The French army was cowardly in World War II, and German tanks were unstoppable killing machines. Every single one of these supposed facts is complete garbage. Today, we're taking apart 8 World War II lies that have somehow survived 80 years of proper research. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never look at French military history the same way again. Welcome back to the war. Now, let's start with perhaps the most British myth of all. That plucky little Britain faced down the Nazi war machine all by itself from 1940 to 1941. What's your take on this one? Drop a comment below. Do you think Britain really stood alone? This narrative is so deeply embedded in British culture that the Imperial War Museum is literally building an entire gallery to debunk it. The truth? Britain was never really alone. From day one, the British Empire and Commonwealth provided massive support. Troops from Jamaica, India, New Zealand, Australia and South Africa. We're talking about millions of soldiers, workers and vast resources flowing in from across the globe. Even during the darkest days of 1940, Britain had the Royal Navy controlling the seas, the Empire's resources backing the war effort, and crucially, American Lend-Lease aid started to flow. The idea of standing alone is romantic nonsense that ignores the global nature of Britain's war effort. Speaking of myths that have shaped how we see entire nations, wait until you hear about the French cowardice lie. Perhaps the most unfair stereotype in military history, that French soldiers were cowards who surrendered without a fight in 1940. This isn't just wrong, it's a complete distortion of what actually happened during the Battle of France. What's your take on French military performance in World War II? Drop your thoughts below. Were they really cowards or victims of circumstance? The facts tell a different story. French forces suffered over 100,000 casualties in just 6 weeks of fighting in 1940. Hardly the actions of cowards. The problem wasn't courage, it was catastrophically poor leadership and outdated tactics against Germany's Blitzkrieg warfare. French generals were fighting a 1919 war with motorcycle messages and static defences, while Germans coordinated fast-moving panzer divisions and radios and air support. French soldiers fought bravely, but were let down by commanders who couldn't adapt to modern warfare. The Maginot Line, mentally, meant they were perfectly prepared for the last war, but not this one. And if you think that's the only time warfare propaganda shaped our view of the Blitz, you're in for a shock. The Blitz spirit, everyone pulling together, upper and lower classes united, keeping calm and carrying on. It's one of Britain's most cherished wartime memories. It's also largely fictional. According to BBC historians who've actually studied the period, the Blitz was a time of terror, confusion and anger, marked by government incompetence and class warfare. While the wealthy escaped to country houses or reinforced basement clubs, working class families were left with inadequate shelters that literally crumbled when bombs hit them. Do you think the Blitz spirit was real or manufactured? Let us know. The government had built deep, comfortable shelters for officials in disused tube stations, but told ordinary people to make do with Anderson shelters in their gardens or Morris shelters that were basically iron cages. When these proved useless, people took matters into their own hands, literally invading the London Underground and forcing the government to provide proper facilities. The famous community spirit wasn't unity, it was ordinary people fighting for survival while the establishment looked after itself. But Britain wasn't the only country spreading myths about its military capabilities. The Tiger tank, the Panther, the mighty German war machine, rolling across Europe with superior technology. Except, it's mostly propaganda nonsense. The Imperial War Museum has an entire section dedicated to Second World War weapons that failed, and German super tanks feature prominently. The famous Tiger tank, only 1,347 were ever built because they were mechanically unreliable, fuel-hungry monsters that broke down constantly. The Mors super heavy tank weighed 200 tons and could barely reach 12 miles per hour, and was so impractical that only 2 prototypes were completed. Meanwhile, the supposedly inferior American Sherman tank was reliable, mass-produced, and actually won the war. The Sherman wasn't designed to fight other tanks. That's what airstrikes and artillery were for. It was designed to support infantry and could be produced in massive numbers, which it did brilliantly. And speaking of German military myths, wait until you hear about the Lightning War strategy. Blitzkrieg, the innovative German military doctrine that revolutionised warfare, except it wasn't a doctrine at all. Military historians have confirmed that Blitzkrieg was a term invented by newspapers to sell papers. The German High Command was just as surprised by their rapid victories in Poland and France as everyone else. They weren't expecting lightning campaigns, they were planning for drawn-out conflicts like World War I. The reality is that German success came from combined arms tactics using emerging technology like tanks and aircraft and radio communications working together. This wasn't revolutionary, it was the natural evolution of military technology. Every major army was developing similar tactics. The myth of Blitzkrieg as some genius German innovation is just that, a myth created by propaganda and perpetuated by lazy historians. But if German military innovation was overhyped, what about D-Day being the turning point? June 6, 1944, the day the tide turned, when the Allies finally opened the second front and began Germany's downfall. Inspiring stuff, but historically inaccurate. By D-Day, Germany were already losing the war. The turning point actually happened in November 1942. The British victory at Alamein, the American landings in North Africa, and crucially, the Soviet encirclement of German forces at Stalingrad. From that point on, Germany was in retreat on all fronts. D-Day was important, absolutely, but it accelerated an already inevitable Allied victory rather than creating it. The decisive battles that determined the war's outcome had already been fought on the Eastern Front, in North Africa, and in the Battle of the Atlantic. And speaking of the Eastern Front, let's destroy another myth about Soviet tactics. The image of Soviet commanders throwing endless waves of peasants at German machine guns until the ammunition run out is one of the most persistent World War II myths. It's also complete rubbish. Military historians have thoroughly debunked this. What the Germans mistook for human wave attacks were actually poorly coordinated frontal assaults by a desperate army that initially lacked the training and technology to compete with the Wehrmacht, but the Red Army learned and evolved quickly. By 1943, the Soviets were using sophisticated defensive tactics at Kursk, grouping anti-tank guns in hardpoints rather than spreading them evenly, and developing specialised anti-tank ammunition. The idea that they relied solely on overwhelming numbers ignores their tactical evolution and the reality that they actually faced manpower shortages by mid-war. And finally, let's tackle one of the most romanticised resistance movements in history. The romantic image of French resistance fighters, brave men and women sabotaging German operations, gathering intelligence and keeping the flame of freedom alive in occupied France. It's a beautiful story that's largely fictional. Historical research shows that actual resistance activities were extremely rare. Throughout the entire war, only a microscopic percentage of French people were even willing to read resistance leaflets, let alone carry out sabotage operations. Many of those who did help Allied airmen escape did so for money, not patriotic conviction. The French resistance as a major force was largely a post-war invention by Charles de Gaulle to restore French pride. Compare this to Tito's Yugoslav partisans who actually liberated their own country, and you can see the difference between myth and reality. So there you have it, 8 World War II myths destroyed. From unfair stereotypes about French courage to romantic notions about French resistance, these stories have survived because they are more comfortable than the complex, messy reality of the world's deadliest conflict. The real story of World War II is far more interesting than these simplified myths. It's a story of technological innovation, strategic deception, class conflict, and human adaptation under extreme pressure. It's a story where the good guys weren't always good, the bad guys weren't always incompetent, and victory came through industrial capacity, alliance building, and sheer bloody-minded determination rather than individual heroism. So what other World War II myths need debunking? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to check out our other videos where we debunk more myths on the British and US military. Hi soldiers, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and leave your thoughts in the comments. And check out our merch and membership programs. And don't forget to check back in again soon. That's an order.